Recording in progress.
Good evening. This is the Chicago Computer Society Linux SIG meeting for October 2025. Tonight we've got a full slate of material. In fact, between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. today, I added 5 new articles to my handout list. And one of them is very interesting. It's anybody who's running Linux using the EXT4 format. They have released a new version of driver for that gives you a performance boost. But if anybody's on BTRFS, it's actually slower than the old EXT4, believe it or not. So I learned that a couple months back. At any rate, I'm going to open up the floor to anybody who's got a problem, comment, issue, etc. As the first order of business. Anybody got any problems, issues, etc.? Bob?
Well, I certainly had some issues. One of them did relate to upgrading LMDE 6 to LMDE 7, Linux Mint Debian Edition, in place. I had already done a successful Mint upgrade in place with no issues. But this LMDE 7 would not boot. It needed a grub repair. So I had to actually boot into the grub repair disk, which I put onto Ventoy. And I had to make sure that I wrote down exactly which EFI partition. I have 2 EFI boot partitions, and they're on different drives, and they're for different Linuxes. So I put that back together, and I meanwhile cleaned up what was in the BIOS and got every one of those entries working. So now I've got 2 entries that boot into one instance of LMDE 7 and 2 entries that boot into one instance of Linux Mint Xera 22.2.
I had no trouble with either Mint 22.2 upgrade, and I also did LMDE 6 to 7 on 2 USB attached storage drives. One is 2.5 inch SATA, and one is an M.2 SATA drive. I had no issues with any of them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just my luck. I don't know.
Yeah, I think maybe.
That or you've got a cloud over your head, Linus.
No, it's how complex my setup is.
Yeah, well,
I run Linux off of an external enclosure, and that's always problematic. It's problematic for trim. It's problematic for partitioning. It's problematic for finding the partitions. It's problematic for doing smart analysis of the drive, see whether it's failing. Windows says that it's probably about halfway there. Given all the pounding on it I've done over the years, I think that's probably about right.
well,
Just 3 years worth of use, but I probably put 10 years worth of wear on it.
Well, see, for me, the 2.5 inch drive, I went to one of my minis that I use frequently for bare metal, either repairs or special installations. And I took the drive and stuck it in there, even though it's normally attached by USB, and did the upgrade on that one. But the M.2 SATA, I left that as USB and updated it on another system that already had Windows 10 still running on it. And both went fine.
This is SATA 3, and it's inside of an enclosure which does pass the full range of UASP commands, so it can do everything it's supposed to, but it doesn't report all its smart stuff, and you cannot use Samsung Magician on it. So there are limitations when you do USB.
Yes. The Samsung, I've used the Magician for lots of years now, but it doesn't work on all Samsung models. It depends upon which model you have as to whether that'll work. And then even with that, they stopped really making it available per se. You just have whatever the last versions were out there on the internet. And it doesn't always give you all the features it used to give you, including the rapid boost, which allowed it to cache things more so that it seemed to perform faster than without the ready boost.
My Samsung Magician still updates, and it's version 8 point something. And it has a lot of those features, not everything.
Well, the rapid boost I haven't seen in a long time on versions that still get updated. Also, it used to be you would periodically find firmware updates. And I haven't seen a firmware update on any of my qualifying Samsung drives. God, I don't know how long.
Well, anyway, this is an Evo 860. And my other one is an Evo 870, which is internal to the tower. But from the point of view of Linux, it complicates grub. And it puts you, it gives you more than one EFI boot or ESP partition. And so you have to be careful to keep track of which is which, just as you have to be careful which SD or which NVMe you're keep off of those and find the correct Ventoy to put the Ventoy update onto so that it doesn't format the wrong drive if you're formatting or an install. I was actually making a new Ventoy drive. That's the only time you get this problem, where it's installing and formatting. Otherwise, it's just updating.
Yeah, I've got a regular flash drive, 128 gigabyte for that. And I also took a 32 gigabyte SSD with a USB header, and I made a Ventoy bootable system out of that.
Yeah, I've got two for the tower. One for the NUC. The two for the tower are install ISOs, which take up a lot of space. And the other one is utilities that might be useful in Linux and sometimes in Windows.
Yeah, I have a mix too. I don't have straight Linux or straight Windows. I just put it all together.
Yeah, I like to keep my Linux and Windows stuff separate because I have a Macrim Reflect WinRE, which is for each computer, which is good for Windows if I need to restore, which I haven't had to do in a long, long time. Windows 11 is very solid.
Well,
And for that matter, so is Mint. LMDE, it lacks a few things, but it's pretty solid.
Well, I've had some systems where I'm installing Windows 11 on, and sometimes I run into problems with the unsupported older equipment. And I found that instead of beating my head against the wall, so to speak, I just took an image of the first one I successfully got in, and then restored the image to any of the other machines, and it made the whole process a hell of a lot simpler.
I would like to mention one thing that makes a Linux restore a whole lot easier, and I've mentioned this before. If you have the Synaptic Package Manager installed, you can save your software markings along with your data backups.
Okay, in one of the videos that I was reviewing, I don't remember if it was, I think it was yesterday, or at least I started watching it yesterday, and I think I finished it this morning. This guy went on a rant about basically the synaptic package being removed, and what's left in its place is just not worth noting, other than he did give good marks to Discovery under KDE Plasma.
Now, was this in KDE or Ubuntu or Mint?
He didn't care. He played around with many different distros. And bottom line, as far as he's concerned, anybody who's got a Linux going that doesn't have a Synaptics package installed should install it. It's easy to do from a terminal. Sudo apt install Synaptics
Right.
and get done with it. And
Yeah.
that gives you, and part of the reason he was giving is about details of dependencies that you get into Synaptics that most of the other software updating software does not provide.
Even though it won't, well, the Mint installer and they use the same one in LMDE. And also the Ubuntu installer, last I knew, I haven't been in there in a while. They both will prevent problems that result from not having the right dependencies. They'll tell you it needs this, it needs that, but they won't tell you all the details that Synaptic does. And so Synaptic really is the way to go, also because it saves its markings really nicely. You can also make a list of all your Flatpaks and all your snaps, and I save that.
Right.
Saves a lot of time if I have to rebuild like I just did.
Well, it's mostly on a clean install where you definitely want that kind of information. If, on the other hand, you have even an old backup, you can restore that, update all the software, and then the only thing that might be missing is new ones you put in and old ones you deleted.
You can do that if the partition hasn't gotten messed with, which is what happened to me.
Yeah.
Once you restore that partition, it may not be the same size, it may not be the same number, it may not be the same location. And then, at least for Clonezilla, that's a disaster. For Macrim Reflect, not so much.
Well, see, with me, I have a lot of 32 gigabyte disks that I do mini versions on, but periodically, because everything keeps growing, I have to jigger the home directory and the root directory to have enough space to do what I need to do.
Yeah, well, break those out into separate partitions. Also var because if you have more than 27 Flatpaks, you're going to run out of inodes.
Yeah, well, that's why I mentioned in previous meeting or two that if you have more than a half a dozen Flatpaks, you need to break out the var folder into its own separate partition and move everything there. Then you do a rename of the original root var folder so that it's not properly named. So you have something like .bak or .old added to the name of the var folder, and then you do a make directory of the new var. It's empty, and Linux will know, oh, I got to go over here where you moved it to use that new partition with var.
To play it safe, you could make a symlink.
Yeah.
And that is what is being done with several of the directories which were moved inside of USR. They made siblings out of the old directories. So, if you have something that points to the old directories, it'll still work. I think Pete wants to say something.
Yeah, Bob, could you put the command line code in the chat for installing the Synaptic Manager?
Sure, I'll do that right away. It's very simple.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's easy peasy.
It's easier to cut and paste it.
Why can't you type?
Sometimes my fat fingers get in the way.
Well, what you got to do is stick each of your fingers in a pencil sharpener and crank it until you get a nice point to it. Okay, anybody else got anything to bring up during this period? Okay, Wayne, that's not a proper way to raise your hand.
Okay. Yeah, well, anyway, what's going on with Firefox? I keep hearing something about Firefox not very popular anymore. And I've been using Firefox all along.
Well, I've been using it, including on Windows 10 and 11, as far as that goes. Yes, it has lost a lot of popularity. And part of that is a lot of decisions that go back 10 or more years that a lot of the fans of Firefox didn't like. They didn't make good sense why they did it, etc., etc. And probably one of the biggest issues with Mozilla Foundation, which does both Firefox and the email program, and it's slipping my mind right now, the name of Thunderbird. Generally speaking, they've been financed, per se, by Google. And it looked like they weren't going to get any financing recently from Google, but that has changed and they are still getting it. And there's a lot of people that think that that may cause issues with the former pretty good privacy standards that Mozilla had for the Firefox. And I don't know if this applies also to Thunderbird or not, but it's a case where the people, basically speaking, are getting leery of that financial support. And it has been going downhill. And it originally, I think, if I remember right, came from the original Netscape browser and eventually got taken over and relabeled as Firefox, if I remember right. Bob?
What's everybody using other than Firefox?
There's lots of programs. In fact, though there are a lot of browsers that are based on Chrome's foundation, which is called Chromium. There are some similar forks of Firefox's code. One of them I have on my machine here, my Linux machine, and it's called Libre Wolf. There's another one that's God, let me double check here. There's I don't have it installed on this version, but there's another one. It's really different looking.
Zen?
It's from Garuda. I think it's called Fire Dragon, if I remember right. And there's one or two others. They're all based upon the origins of Firefox. So they are out there. Look in the software manager. Just type in browsers and see what's there. You should find Libre Wolf definitely. Fire Dragon might be there. I can't say for certain. There's another one I think called Waterfox. And there's an old one that from last I heard was not being well maintained, and behind was Pale Moon. I remember years and years ago I used Pale Moon. So those are some options if you want to check them out while you're still using Firefox, because Firefox is still being made, but you got to really look periodically at all your settings in Firefox, because a lot of things have changed, and you may be needing to look up some things on the internet as to what these options are and whether you want to have them on or off. And I'm not joking when I say that. Bob?
Okay. About what the concern is for Firefox for the Mozilla Foundation. First of all, let me say Thunderbird is a separate foundation now.
Oh, okay.
Second, Firefox, I fell victim to a recent court ruling against Google. Google was told that their advertising relationships were were in violation of antitrust. And they can't do it anymore. This could have hit Ubuntu if Canonical did not have, shall we say, hegemony with Microsoft now. They're very close to each other, those companies. And Microsoft is heavily invested in Ubuntu, and that's why it appears in the Microsoft Store for Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL2. But in any event, Ubuntu is fine. They'll survive nicely. They have a revenue source and they have a paid tier. But Firefox doesn't have any of this. And the biggest problem is if Firefox goes away, almost every other browser is based on Chromium. And if anybody tries to break up the relationship between Google and the Chrome browser, Chromium could be in the same boat as Firefox. It could lose its funding. Just as Red Hat, when it got taken over by IBM, cut way back on Fedora, to the point where people were thinking maybe we're going to have a fork of Fedora, which they can do, but Fedora is not pure GNU public license. It is licensing that Red Hat wrote, which is part open source, part closed source. It's not copyleft. It's not copyright. It's hybrid. And that's really sticky. Whereas with an open source license, GNU public license, people have tried to take their stuff out of the Linux kernel, but under the GNU public license, they have not succeeded in doing it. There have been lawsuits, which every time they've lost. There was something else about Mastodon and ActivityPub suing Truth Social when they took open source code and tried to bring it in-house and make it their own. And they didn't change it, but it's under GNU public license. So they ended up making little changes in the code so they could bring it in-house. But anyway, Firefox does not have this cozy relationship with any major corporation any longer. That, plus the fading market share, is a real concern. You can fork Firefox all you want, but if its market share is falling, then these other projects are not likely to gain traction either. It's kind of like everybody keeps, a lot of Linux enthusiasts keep saying, this is the year of Linux. Windows 12 will be the year of Linux. Windows 11 will be the year of Linux, et cetera, et cetera. But Linux still hovers around 3 to 5% of desktop users. It's much more prevalent in servers, and that's how Linux survives.
Well, the funny part about that is that the other people are saying the desktop is in the neighborhood of 5% now. I don't know how accurate that is. I don't know if anybody has a way of really judging how to say they have 5% of the market. But anyway, aside from that, the news on everything in computers is just mind-boggling. You can't keep up with the stuff. It's a physical impossibility to keep up with all of it to any degree. We now have a KDE Plasma 6.5, which maybe Earl, if he's seen it, will talk about. But I haven't updated my versions of the KDE Plasma in not quite a month's time. But aside from that, you have so many changes going on, especially with kernels. And now the 6.18 LTS kernel is out. And that's supposed to be a blockbuster change. There are more and more distros that I've seen drop in the Firefox browser and put in Chromium. And a few have put in some other variations of other browsers, but most of them are based upon Chromium in one way or another. It's we've got a new update for the EXT4 driver that provides a performance boost, and it outdoes BTRFS file system. And I have at least one distro that uses the better file system. But aside from that, you have a whole lot of stuff going on, and here's one of the kickers. In the last 5 days, roughly, 6 at the most, there have been YouTube videos that were originally giving warnings that there might be some future trouble with YouTube taking down videos that are being made and put up that are still made by a lot of other people, okay? Basically the same thing. Well, one of them got knocked down and taken down. But they do not, YouTube does not tell the content creator what the exact violation is that caused them to put a strike against that creator and remove that video. And one of them has now got 2 strikes, and he's going to change his content so that certain content that was in those 2 videos that got taken down, he will create them, but he will put them on another platform for those who are interested. He hasn't decided which one he's going to go to yet. Yet I had another content creator I use quite a bit. He's out of the UK. He is now warning he has to change a lot of his content for the same basic reason. And a YouTube video I downloaded into a tab. I didn't get to it right away. And when I got around to it, content has been removed and the provider has been removed also. It's suddenly YouTube is doing a lot of censorship of some kind. We don't know any of the details, neither do the creators. They're not told explicitly why. And it's up to the creator to try and take a guess at the content of the video that was taken down by YouTube to try and understand what may have been done or said in that video that he has to change the way they created it. And I have a feeling this is going to be more widespread than it is right now. Because some of the content that was knocked down, I know from past videos by the same content providers, is also available from many other providers out there. So some of the content we might be interested in out of YouTube may end up being censored and pulled off. And I think it's if you get, as a content creator, 3 strikes, you're out permanently. Dennis?
So what, from what you've learned, it's not that it's like political talk in any way. It's technical stuff, technical.
Yeah. Stuff that a whole heck of a lot of content providers are providing. A lot of it has to do with Windows. So it may be Microsoft that's pressuring Google, who owns YouTube, to censor this stuff. Nobody knows for certain. Let's put it that way. So, because they just censor it and they don't tell you exactly why. They just put a strike on your record, and when you hit 3 strikes, you're out. Period. So I don't know all what the heck's going on and why. Some of this is happening, but it smells of censorship, period. And if I'm wrong about it being censorship, then you show us the exact problem that caused it to be removed and a mark against that creator, and prove to us it wasn't just arbitrary censorship. Wayne?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of YouTube videos about not going to Windows 11 and ways that you can bypass all of the security requirements.
Like I said, I know dozens and dozens of content creators who are creating the same content. Sometimes because others did it, they're doing it too. And it's a case where if they keep doing that, most of the at least computer related stuff may end up having no creators, therefore becomes a dead spot in YouTube's content. And it's still censorship. If it's Microsoft putting pressure on Google to say, take this off, okay, fine. That's called censorship, no matter what. That's a violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States to be able to get on your soapbox and say anything you want. Now, at the same time, Google is a provider of providing the soapbox, and they can have a say in that, but they have to really walk a fine line. Otherwise, they could possibly end up in court for violating the First Amendment constitutional rights and maybe other laws. Trust me, the lawyers are making some big change right now. At any rate, I also put in the announcement and invite. I gave you guys roughly 10 items last week. Most of them exist in the software manager. They're mostly flat packs. And I was wondering if any of you really checked some out, maybe even installed some and played with them a bit. What was your results? Don't everybody speak up at once. Well, on my handout, I'll tell you right now, I've got a video, if it hasn't been taken down, that's on one of those items that we were talking about. Hang on for a second here. I'm trying to find my head, and it's not working out. Come on. All right, got you under my skin. No, I want that one. All right. Now, take that one down for the moment. Offhand, you guys, seriously, I'm trying to open up avenues of showing you some things to expand your horizon. Now, you're not going to be interested in everything that I'm showing you by any stretch of the imagination, any more than being interested in every article in my handouts at meetings, or the more FYIs that I create, which I got to be getting to another one. But aside from that, this is to help you expand and maybe find new tools to achieve doing something on your computers, perhaps an easier way. The one video I've got is for Warehouse, which is a flat pack management program. So that is in my handout. And if we got the time, I'll be playing the video, at least in part. Another thing I want to do. And I want to switch there, and I want... Now, since I'm not hearing much from anybody right now, Peter, go ahead.
Okay, so the only thing I'm getting is the meeting notices and the stuff you're sending me on Arduino.
Well, no. What I'm talking about, last month, September's meeting of the Linux SIG, I went over 10 items that are, almost all of them are in Software Manager. And it was in, they weren't in the handout from that meeting. They were reviewed in the meeting, and that's it. So if you sat there like a lump, you have to go up to the YouTube channel and look at the video again, because it was one of the first things I did after discussions.
Be the August.
No, September. This is going to be the second month that I do another 10. It's not on a handout. I didn't give anybody a handout of those 10 items. I brought up Software Manager on my computer and showed you exactly what I was finding and read out the description. And if you can't remember that, I'm sorry, but
So you didn't even put the links in the meeting chat.
no, there is no link. What can I give you a link of? There is no link. This is your software manager in Linux. And for Earl, it would be his Discover program is the same as software manager. And I typed in up to 8 or 10 items and then read the description of what each one of them does. It's in the video up on YouTube.
Okay.
So you'll have to go up there. Now, let's see here. All right. Well, now I'm looking at my screen here, and it's giving me something I haven't seen before, but something new. At any rate, what I'm going to do here, besides shoot myself in the head at this rate, I want to make a change here now before I shoot myself in the head again. And push that off. Anyway, now I got to bring up where are these? Okay. Oh, not you again. And you brought up the wrong one. No. Cancel. I don't like what it wants to do. Wants to keep opening up my stuff in a way that I don't want. If I wanted it, I would have done it that way. All right, anyway, these were some of the items right there. Those 10, and one of them is called Warehouse, a manager for flat packs. And I have a video in this handout today that covers that particular one. But there's disks, disk usage analyzer, mission, ZenMap, Warehouse, Ignition, LACT, a GPU and fan control program. And this last one, I said, I can't enunciate. I'm not even going to try it. CZKAWKA. It finds duplicates of similar files. This was all in last month's meeting. Now, if I bring up File Manager again, and I come up here to the search box and key in LOGS. It comes up here with logs, and it's a flat pack. And why are you in my way? All right. Now, opening it up. Oh, you are going to screw me again. Get out of here. What in the heck is that? Oh, it likes to be a moving target. Whatever this is. Dang it. Anyway, logs shows events from the systemd journal file and sorts them into categories in general for hardware and applications. If you're having problems on your system, be it one program or another, you want to go into the log files and find out what the error messages are. There's a way of doing this in a terminal command, but usually you show the last 20 lines or 50 lines of the log file to look through that and get information that your system logged about what the problem might have been to try and correct things. So this here does it in a better manner to allow you to find out when you got a problem, what was the problem, as best information you can get. That way you may be able to take positive actions, searching or using AI clients in order to find a solution or a workaround the problem that occurred. But also remember, there are two other possibilities. Number one, your software is outdated and there's a new version that maybe fixes a bug in that program that you tripped on. The other possibility is in some machines, if you, even under Linux, though it's much, much rarer than Windows, a reboot can sometimes clear up an issue. And it could be as simple as having a service stop running, or it could be a driver that's misbehaving and needs to be reloaded. And a restart would do that. Okay, so that's number one. Wrong one. Sorry about that. Well, this is another one. And this is one that Drew would probably want to know about. Oops, it's just seal. Put in that. Called Flat Seal. It's another flat pack. What does this thing do? Flat Seal is a graphical utility to review and modify permissions from your Flatpak applications. And there is at least one such Flatpak that Drew had that he was having permission problems with. This could be the solution. Now, the next one. All right. CPU-X. And there's actually two. This first one and the second one are basically the same thing. But the first one is a native install application. The second one here is a Flatpak version. So I'm going to bring that one up. And boy, this is hard to read because of a stupid feature that is getting in my way. CPU-X is a free software that gathers information on CPU, motherboard, and more. CPU-X is similar to CPU-Z in Windows, but CPU-X is free and open source, designed for GNU Linux. Also, it works on BSD versions. This software is written in C++ and built with CMaker tool. It can be used in graphical mode by using GTK, or in text-based mode by using ncursors. A dump mode is present from command line. So apparently, if you're doing this on a terminal, you have the ability to take the information provided and create a dump file of the specifics. So that's another tool available to all of us. Boy, I'm telling you, this one little, I'm not sure what this feature is. I'm going to have to investigate. This is the second meeting with it in my face that I don't like. Now, the next one I've got is not in the software manager and may not be in KDE's discovery. It's called GNOME Power Statistics. This one here is for laptops and other battery-powered devices. This is not in the software stores. You have to look it up either in Synaptics, or you have to do a search on the web to see if you can get the home page of whoever created this to do a download and also find more detailed information. The next one I've got, oops, oh, hey, that's nice. I couldn't do that before. Now that's been corrected. That's good. Gear lever. It's a FreeCAD. And a utility to manage app images with ease. Gear lever will organize and manage app image files for you, generate desktop entries and app metadata, update apps in place, or keep multiple versions side by side. The only person I know of at the moment that uses app images are me and Bob Primick. I don't know about Drew offhand.
Tim,
Yeah.
I do not use app images any longer.
Oh,
I found they didn't integrate well with desktop environments, and they didn't carry over from one desktop environment to another.
I don't doubt that. And I've only had, I think, one or two app images, and only in one distro. But they, those one or two that I did do seem to work, at least for me. So if you're into app images, this might be a tool that will help you out. Don't know. I haven't had time really to get to real in-depth stuff yet. It may be around Christmas time and the beginning of the next year that I'll have a block of time that I can do some other things. The next one is called Blanket. It's a flat pack. This is its image. As you can see, this is an offbeat application, and I put it in for one simple reason. There are some people that have sometimes difficulties with their sleep habits, and this provides sounds. Some sounds will give you make you energetic. Other ones are very calming and soothing. So you have to go through them to see what ones you would want to do at, say, bedtime. And you could use a Bluetooth speaker under the pillow or Bluetooth earbuds or something like that that are comfortable to wear in bed. So it's something to help calm your mind down. And that's basically all this one is. But it's an interesting one. I have seen something similar to this under Windows as well. But it's also available on your phones. I know at least it's on one of the two major brands, iPhone or Android. It might be under both. And it allows you to do the same thing with your smartphone. So I'm just putting it out there for anybody that's interested. Okay, the next one. Bizarre. Oops. Had it. Almost lost it. Okay. This is what it looks like. It's a new, oops, nuts. All right. It's a new app store for GNOME with a focus on discovering and installing applications and add-ons from Flatpak remotes, particularly FlatHub. It emphasizes support for developers who make the Linux desktop possible. Bizarre features a curated tab that can be configured by distributors to allow for more localized experience. So basically, this could be an added store for content. Now, this wouldn't apply to Earl with because he's on KDE, but basically, Cinnamon is a custom version of GNOME. Whether they stay up to date with the latest versions of GNOME, I don't know offhand. Go ahead, Bob.
There have been a lot of problems with people assuming that Cinnamon was actually GNOME. I've had GNOME applications which showed up without their buttons. I wasn't able to click out of a user agreement window in one of the video downloaders and almost couldn't install it. All kinds of weird scaling issues. Oh, no, it's not the same.
Well, you got to understand, GNOME is its own desktop environment, and Cinnamon may have been made from a older version of GNOME that they don't update to the current GNOME environment because of the standards the Mint team created for the Cinnamon desktop. So in a sense, Cinnamon may be in a flavor, so to speak, of Mate desktop. Mate desktop is GNOME version 2, and it's frozen in version 2. But what version Cinnamon was, it's only a speculation on my part, probably was a version 3. Go ahead, Bob.
It was either GNOME 2 or GNOME 3, and the split was largely over how the GNOME organization was behaving. They were absolutely wrecking the desktop experience. That's one reason I left Ubuntu.
Well, I've heard some other similar kind of issues with GNOME environment from some people. I don't know exactly what the heck's going on because I don't particularly care for the straight up vanilla GNOME environment desktop. And it's just not my cup of tea. I would prefer even KDE over GNOME. But Mate looks a little bit too old for me, and I don't know if Cinnamon was made by a version 2 or a version 3. Something in my instinct says it was a 3, but I may be wrong. And it would have been probably an early to mid 3 at best. Next up. This is kind of an interesting one. Oops. Frog. And there are 2 of these. Well, there's multiples here, but there's a 2. This is the flat pack version, and this one down here on my screen, it could be a different location on yours, is a native install version. It's up to you to decide what version you want to go with. Extract text from images, websites, videos, or QR codes by taking a picture of the source. So that's what this thing is supposed to do. Basically speaking, from what I'm gathering here, this is an OCR type program. It's graphical, and hopefully if you're looking and needing OCR capability, this is one option. And let's see what I got here. Okay. Now this one here, I am interested in, and I don't know when I'll get to it. Like I said, I don't have enough time. All right. Local send. Now, that gives you an idea of local send's settings, and you're either sending or receiving. And in contrast to most alternatives, no external servers are needed. Everything happens locally in the Wi-Fi network. And one of my questions, to be very frank and honest, can I also use it with Ethernet? Because not all my machines have Wi-Fi.
Jim,
Yes?
I used it. You know, I have these 2 computers here
Right.
on the same
Network.
cable box. Yeah, network, Ethernet. And it does use Ethernet, and it works fine. My gosh, I could copy a file from the Dell to the HP, and just,
And
boy.
this eliminates having to use a flash drive or
Yeah,
an
yeah.
external USB SSD drive to transfer files from machine to machine to
It
machine.
works beautifully.
It's supposed to. There is, however, you're not on Linux Mint. Linux Mint has Warpinator. It's supposed to have similar capabilities, but various videos and articles I read think many think the local send is still better than the Warpinator.
It sure works for me.
That's good to hear. You're the first to say you actually used one of these ideas.
Yeah. Well, while I'm talking to you, have you tried Rusk Desk?
No, not yet.
It's like any desk, but Rusk Desk.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
what Rust disk is.
It's supposed to be working with Wayland, like
Well,
like it.
The other thing that's an issue with Rust, and it's getting more and more into Linux, is the way a lot of the code is formatted. It makes it a nightmare to be able to do a file comparison of a modified version versus the previous version and see what changes took place.
I think Linus addressed that a week ago,
Well,
and
he
supposedly the Rust people.
he is trying to address that, and hopefully he has success. But that's in the kernel only.
Yeah.
Now, there's another. I don't remember who it was. They took utilities and converted some utilities to Rust,
Yeah,
and-
RS
and they broke. They
a
don't
couple
function.
things broke. Yeah, a couple things broke.
Yeah, that's right. Because either the person didn't know enough coding or something along that line, but
Yeah.
it did not work correctly, and they released it.
Yeah, well, some distribution is actually using it by default, as I understand it.
Yes, and that's a big major mistake in my book.
Well, they'll fix it up.
Now, the last one I have for
Earl,
Yes,
does it work cross-platform?
I think so. I installed it a couple of weeks ago, but as I was reading it, I think it said it's even works with Windows. Yeah.
I think I remember hearing and reading that it works with Windows also.
Yeah.
So you should be able to do a mixed environment.
Now,
If-
the way you need it on both machines,
Right. Each
and you
machine.
bring it up and put one into receive mode, and you go back. I use the KVM switch to go back and forth.
Right.
It works.
Yeah.
Fine.
It's a little bit different if, like, where I have some machines that are in the kitchen and I'm over here in the living room in the front of the house. If I wanted to send a file from one of my machines here to a machine in the kitchen, because that's the one I'm working on, yeah, I have to get up and go to the other machine to receive it. So
Yeah, you do have to do that.
so
You
there
have to
are
do-
some instances. Now, another one that I understand is available for Linux also, and I have used it on Windows. So it's available there too, I know. I'm not sure about these two programs working on the Mac. I would think Local Send might work on a Mac.
I think so.
This last one here is called NAP S as in Sam number 2. This is a scanner application, and you have to do a like a Google search, any kind of a search on the internet to bring up the web page and be able to download it from there. It's not in the at least the Mint software manager. Okay, now I want to pause here for a moment. A couple of you sent me emails after the last month's meeting with some ideas of making some changes. And I'd rather have each of those people bring up what they were trying to get across. And it's a case where some things you might want to have done are not in my wheelhouse, so to speak. I consider myself as somebody to help with troubleshooting some problems and introducing you to new ideas and pieces of software that may solve some of your issues. Go ahead, Earl. You got to press the space bar. You got to hold down the space bar. Press and hold the space bar. You're not releasing. You're still muted.
Bob said NAPS 2 is not in Manager, and I just commented it's not in Discover either.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
offhand, I didn't think it would be, but you never know, Nat. Sometimes
Yeah.
it could be in one. You're in a different software manager than what we've got,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
don't know if even the NAPS 2 exist in Synaptics offhand. That's another possibility.
Yeah.
At any rate, some ideas came in, and I think we need to try and discuss those. One was from Peter, and the other one was from Bob. And it may be a case where some of your ideas, I need other people helping out doing some of those things, because I'm doing this work even to get this meeting and last week's meeting literally just before the meeting to have what I was presenting ready to go. And so I don't have extra time. And I have some projects I really want to get to, and I don't have the time for it right now. And it might be like after the last meeting in December and before the first meeting in January, when I'll have the biggest block of time that I can do some of those things I want to do. So does Bob or Peter want to bring up your ideas that you wrote me an email on?
I just pulled up the old email in my send box because it's been a while. That was a month ago.
Right.
So I was suggesting that we break the meeting up into the 1.5 hour total meeting into about 3 sections and designate the 3 sections.
Designate
So that
them
we're
as
not-
what?
What?
Designate them as what?
Towards the capabilities of the users. So do a early novice section,
Okay.
and then do a more general, and then maybe do an advanced section, something that's a little bit higher up the chain of stream. Rather than doing 40 or 50 minutes of YouTube videos totally, maybe lock it down to 3, and then one novice, one general, one advanced, and then be able to discuss the video itself rather than just go to the next one.
Well,
Just a
sometimes
thought.
sometimes I do go ahead, but a lot of times I stop and ask for comments, discussion, and most of the time I hear nothing. So yes, I'm going to continue on. I'm not going to sit there for unknown amount of time when I can proceed to the whatever comes next. That's my position on that. Now, as far as having primarily 3 different presentation and or videos or articles and a discussion about them, that could possibly be doable. But some of that right now, I would need at least some help from others to do some of these kind of ideas. I don't always get newbie stuff. I try and put in as much as I can. And under Linux, those that are novices are usually referred to as nobs. Noobs meaning that they don't have any knowledge and experience under Linux, and they're trying to learn. The general can be just about anything, and the advanced, a lot of advanced stuff right now, I'm holding off on because I haven't had time to do any of it myself. And I can't do any kind of presentation, even discussions of a video if I presented them to help you out. Ooh. Oh no, we can't have that. 2 Bobs? It's hard enough with 1. At any rate.
No, I just got my other computer back up and running.
Okay. At least it's working. Do you want to discuss anything about the message you sent me?
It's been a while. I'm not sure I recall exactly what I was talking about
either. It was almost a month ago.
I think I sent something about co-hosting meetings and having a co-host. And I was wondering just what the responsibilities would be and what would be involved in that. What kind of preparation would be involved in that?
Well, it can expand beyond helping admit new people into the meeting. This time I caught it, but you could let yourself in. Because
I was going to do that.
Yeah, I just beat you to it because I happened to have my hand at the right place at the right time. But it's a case where a few of you have done at least one or more presentations in the past, and basically speaking, if you don't like the content that I'm providing, that most of you don't know anything about to begin with, we got to have more people doing some presentations besides me. Right now, there's a lot of information, including security information, in the handout I have for tonight. Basically speaking, because of the rise of the share of the market, Linux is gaining, especially with the end of Windows 10. You have an increase by hackers and those who create malicious software focusing more attention to the Linux desktop. Right now, there doesn't seem to be consensus of doing an AV program. There is clamshell AV that's available, but it doesn't work in the same vein as AV programs under Windows, but it should be adequate short term. In my handout I have tonight, and I just found out about it today, another piece of software being developed by a company. I haven't looked deep into it. I haven't had the time. And we're talking between 11 a.m. today and 5 o'clock p.m. today. I added 5 items to the bottom of the list. So it is not a trivial thing that I'm doing, and the amount of information that I'm seeing is getting extreme. Oops, I want to cancel that. Now this is the handout. Don't strain your eyes over it. But warehouse is the first one here. That's a piece of flat pack that I brought to your attention last month. Here's an article. My 84-year-old mom uses Linux And when you listen to the video, she's been using it without having to ask him questions or support for over 10 years from the sounds of it. But as you can see, this is a lengthy one here. And let's see here. I think it's the last 6 here.
Jim, we're not seeing anything but your face.
Well, I'm glad here. I didn't share the screen.
Okay, okay.
I'm just I can share it now. Hang on a minute. Here's the list. It's quite lengthy. And these last 6 are the ones I just added between 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Mulved VPN, they also have a Mulved browser that is fairly high in privacy. It could possibly compete somewhat with Brave browser. Linux on HP Elite Desk Minis, which I have many and use. Also, Earl has one, I know. It is just I've shown through the Zoom camera, webcam camera, some of my units in the past in general. This gives you photographic images within the video. So you can see a little bit more of it because he does open it up and show you a little bit of the insides. Linux is leveling up. New tool performs boosts, updates, and more. You'll have to read it. It's YouTube. Excuse me, you have to view it. Newer trust. Never trust a PDF again. And a lot of malware has been spread by images and PDFs. And this is a program that somebody created that creates a virtual environment, opens up a PDF or image and other things in that sandbox, and then displays an image outside of that sandbox of what the content is without any malware infecting your system. That's the claim. I haven't had a time to other than go through the video to tell you a little bit about it. Then there's Linux Revolution, 5 top distros to rule 2026. And there was at least one in there. They liked Pop OS that has a new Cosmic desktop that they liked as, I think, number 4. They also had a Fedora in there as number 2. I can't remember what the other ones were other than the number 1 is Mint. Mind you, this is a person's subjective view and opinion. Others will have different opinions to some degree, but most of them do agree that in a top 5 of their choice, Mint is usually one of the 5. Linux just got faster. This is what I was talking about before. EXT4 boost. Also, it's a daily or weekly news thing. So they also talk about Rust drama, NVIDIA, next gen driver. So that's worth looking at. And that was a last minute add-in. But I have lots of other articles, as you can see. This is a long list. So I'm gonna kill that and display that, and I'm gonna Control A, Control C, kill that, bring that down, bring this up, and then I open up a new window, and malware browser guard wants my attention. Oops. There we go. Okay. Now, the first thing I have here is warehouse. This is manage your flat packs.
So today I want to share with you guys a really neat program that's really more kind of like a software center. It is a nice GUI program to help you manage your flat packs. This program is called Warehouse. People have been telling me about it for the last, I would say, a couple of months. I've been hearing a lot about this program, so I recently installed it, and I've got to say, this is a pretty fantastic program. Now, Warehouse, you can find the source code available over on GitHub. They are licensed under the GPL v3, so it is free and open source software. Under releases, you can see the last release was 2.0.2, and that was 3 days ago, so I've got the latest release because I installed Warehouse via Flatpak. Flatpaks update themselves, so I should be on the latest release. If I scroll down a little bit, you can see the primary language that this is programmed in is Python. So those of you that maybe want to contribute to the project, if you know a little Python, you should be good. Now let me switch over to another workspace and let me actually launch the Warehouse program so you guys can see this in action. And you can see it is a nice, really attractive kind of GUI package manager, if you will. If I move my head out of the way, it basically has 3 columns here. On the left side, you've got this here, which is really more of a menu. You can see we've got packages, remotes, user data, snapshots, and install packages. I'm going to go back to packages. So packages are my installed packages. So this is everything I have installed as a Flatpak. Now I don't have a ton of Flatpaks installed on my system. So my main distribution here on this particular machine, it's running Arco Linux, and being an Arch-based distribution, I have so much.
I want to point out there, besides his warehouse Flatpak, Mission Center was one of the programs last month that I mentioned also.
Software that is natively packaged for Arch Linux, or it's in the AUR, the Arch user repository. You know, I do install a lot of things as snaps and Flatpaks and app images. I really don't care where I get my software. You know, I'll install any package format available, but because on Arch-based distros, it's not that necessary. You know, I just have a handful of Flatpaks installed. In this case, I have a handful of snaps. I keep, a dozen or so app images around for various things, but you can see in the center column, this is just a list of the things I already have installed. We do have a couple of buttons here where I could filter the packages, or I could select certain packages for various actions. If I select, for example, this Discord Flatpak, I could tick that on, and then I could perform an action such as uninstall if I wanted to uninstall that particular Flatpak. I do not want to uninstall any of these. The filter option would be great if you had like a ton of Flatpaks installed. And of course, some distributions do use Flatpak as their primary packaging format. So if you're on one of those distributions, the filtering option is probably something really useful. Now on this far right-hand column, if I select one of my Flatpaks, for example, the bottles Flatpak here, you can see it's going to give me information about bottles. It's going to tell me how much user data it is using, the installed size. It's going to give me the application ID, licensing information, installation information, and commit information as well. And once again, you want to uninstall it, you can uninstall it right here on this right-hand sidebar, or you can also just launch the program. You do have a couple of different menus here. Now, the main menu is actually over here on this far left column where you get Open Files, Keyboard Shortcuts, and About Warehouse. You can see if I go to the About information, this is Warehouse 2.0.2. Again, this is the absolute latest version. And then Keyboard Shortcuts. Now, I haven't played really with any of the keyboard shortcuts. It's interesting they include key bindings for a program like this, because this kind of program really, I don't know why you would necessarily want hotkeys for any actions. I think this is one of the rare programs where I think most people are just going to want to point and click on things, and I'm a key binding guy, so I love programs having key bindings, but I'm probably not going to play too much with the key bindings. You also have a second menu, if you will, over here on the right column. So when you have this information about a specific flat pack, you pick a flat pack here, you get this little column over here, you can show, for example, details about this particular flat pack. If it's got anything to show, you can reinstall if you need to reinstall, for example, bottles in this case. You can copy the launch command, and you can also view snapshots. Now, view snapshots is interesting. So over here, of course, remember we had packages, remotes, user data, and snapshots. I don't have any snapshots. What is a snapshot? Well, with Flatpak, you can take snapshots of a particular Flatpak. So it's like a snapshot where it's basically a snapshot of the Flatpak in that current state with that current user data or whatever, kind of like you take a snapshot of your Linux system, for example. Well, this is the same thing, except specifically for that Flatpak. Now, obviously, I don't have any snapshots, but I do know this. The command for some Flatpak actions, like taking snapshots or purging old data, things like that, they're not commands that I'm going to remember. And I'm a terminal guy, right? I always have to go look up certain commands when I do them with Flatpak. But this GUI front end, this program warehouse, really makes some of these actions very easy. The snapshot actions, obviously, but also things like user data. I just mentioned user data. We have all of the Flatpaks that I have installed here. You can see this is the active data, and then leftover data. This is leftover data from Flatpaks I did have installed, but I don't have installed now. This is the OBS Flatpak. I have OBS installed just as the native Arch package right now, but I guess I had the Flatpak version of OBS installed previously, and there's some leftover data. You can see about 9 megabytes of data, and I can actually delete that. So that's really cool, because normally to do that action is some kind of command, some Flatpak terminal command, a command line. I don't know what the command is. I always got to go Google it, right? So this is really nice that Warehouse allows me to do that. Also, under the remote section, of course, you can connect to various repositories. FlatHub, of course, is already connected here. You can see that's the current remote. We can add other popular remotes, such as the App Center remote or the FlatHub beta remote, or you could add a custom remote. So if you had a custom repository, maybe you have your own custom repository of Flatpaks that you build.
Okay, due to time, I'm gonna stop this one. Does anybody have anything to say about it, or questions that I might be able to answer? Hearing nothing. Okay, I'm gonna move
It
on.
might be something to play with.
That's what I've been trying to get across last month and this month. These are tools that are right in your software manager for the most part, and you don't know much about any of them. And unless you explore, you're not going to get information about them. But here's one on Warehouse, and this guy also has Mission Critical. Both were from last month's 10 items. Hang on. Here's another thing that came up recently.
Series that just got introduced, which is a new file system driver for the NTFS file system called NTFS Plus. Let's talk about why it matters, what kind of performance gains we might see out of this, and some of the concerns. Before we read through the introduction to this patch series, I want to talk a little bit about NTFS support on Linux. First off, what is NTFS? NTFS, also known as the NT file system, and commonly referred to as the New Technology File System, is a proprietary journaling file system developed by Microsoft in the 1990s. The reason being it was developed to overcome scalability, security, and other limitations with FAT. NTFS adds several features that FAT and HPFS lack, including access control lists, file system encryption, transparent compression, sparse files, file system journaling, volume shadow copy, which is a feature that allows backups of systems while in use. And it is still the default file system for every Windows desktop and server operating system today. Some of the other features that aren't listed here include large volume support with 64-bit addressing and on multi-terabyte disks, alternate data streams, ADS, which lets single file names hold multiple data forks. And because Windows dominates the desktop world, NTFS has become the de facto cross-platform file system even for things like external USB devices. And if you've ever used a Windows formatted flash drive, more than likely it was NTFS. Now, you might be asking, why in the world does Linux care about NTFS if we use different file systems? Well, some of the reasons include being able to mount Windows drives for file exchange. You want to make sure that those types of reads and writes are very stable, quick, and work well between the two. Also, you might want to rescue NTFS on Linux. Let's say something happened, you could go to a Linux computer and hook up an NTFS partition and then try to actually rescue data, or if you just want to boot Linux off of a Windows shared external disk. These are all important things that Linux users may or may not want to do. A big reason for this push here is the fact that NTFS drivers have been remaining fairly stale as of late, and not much has been developed on that front. So it's interesting to see this patch series called NTFS Plus and some of the decisions that they've made here. So that's a little background on why we might want to use NTFS. Let's read about this patch series and why this is important here to Linux. First off, introduction. The NTFS file system still remains a default file system for Windows, and the well-maintained NTFS driver in the Linux kernel enhances interoperability with Windows devices, making it easier for Linux users to work with NTFS formatted drives. Currently, NTFS support in Linux was the long-neglected NTFS Classic read-only, which has been removed from the Linux kernel, leaving the poorly maintained NTFS 3. NTFS 3 still has many problems and is poorly maintained. So users and distributions are still using the old legacy NTFS 3G drivers. So now we kind of understand why this patch series was made. Basically to replace old and stale drivers. This is really a remake of NTFS support on Linux. And it's actually based around the old classic read-only NTFS driver in the kernel as a base. It includes a lot of goals that we're going to be going through. And again, this is important because hopefully we'll see better write support and performance out of this in a more modern maintained driver. Now, the one thing
Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go on this one here. Now, before I open up the floor, a question might cross your mind. Why do I care? I've even seen in the last 1 to 2 months more and more nodes new to Linux. Instead of using separate partitions for the root and home directory and possibly other directories as well, you are finding they are using the Windows Mac model of what I call the Easter egg. Everything in just one large partition, no separation of user stuff from the operating system, etc. And it's simpler for a lot of the people, and they also use this a lot more in dual booting with a Windows system. So what this provides, and some are suggesting, is okay, you shrink down the Windows environment a fair amount, making space for a install alongside of a Linux distro, but you also create a NTFS. In the past, I think it may have been used with FAT32 format, a separate partition where you exchange data between the Windows environment and the Linux environment. This driver update should eliminate the problem by the fact that you should have read-write abilities in Linux. In the past, if you try to do some of the writing to that partition, you ended up with corruption. And you had to go back into Windows to try and correct the corruption that would occur. Okay, I'll open the floor, and I see Peter has a comment.
Bob, I think you hit it first.
I only see you, Peter, with your hand up right now. So you're number one at the moment.
Okay, so is this a patch that's going to come in on the normal updates, or something we have to load in?
I'll let you go through it further. I didn't see whether it was something you have to do to install it, or it will come in the normal updates. I think the impression I got, it should come in the normal updates, like that update for EXT4 that boosts its performance.
Okay.
If Bob, lower your hand, and if Bob's got his hand up. I don't see Bob's hand up. If Bob wants to speak, please raise your hand. All right, hearing nothing else, I'll look forward.
I'm sorry you couldn't hear me because I'm still hooked to the NUC. All right, what I did want to say was I have been using NTFS to share data between Windows and Linux for years and years, going way back. There were a few file system corruption issues early on, but this was dating back to 2013. But today, the NTFS 3G utilities work pretty well. I always keep in my vest pocket Windows utilities to clean up any mess that might occur. And I don't use the same partition for sharing data that I use for doing temporary stores of Windows data when I'm working with Windows. Those are separate partitions. So this would be an interesting thing to see happen.
Yeah.
Inside
I
the
agree.
kernel.
That's why I included it, and I got the double with the daily double, so to speak, with both the NTFS and the EXT4 information.
Yeah, I was not aware. When did the X4 update happen approximately? When did it come out?
This video was created 7 days ago.
So within the past couple of weeks?
Last week, or I'll say 10 days.
So it is something that if I did a fresh install of LMDE7 might be in there.
Don't know, but it's possible.
Whereas it might not be in a stale install of Mint.
You don't know. At the moment, I can't answer that question.
My point is, I was wondering why the performance of my LMDE7 install was so much faster and snappier, much more responsive than my stale Mint install.
Well,
now I think I know.
Well, yes and no. It may be that the NTFS updated drivers in, or it's the EXT4 driver update that is in, or maybe you got both.
This was in the X4 file system.
Okay.
So it was definitely a change in X4.
Okay, then it may be coming in like I instinctively felt with the regular updates. It will probably take a while for some people to notice the change. Don't know. And a lot of people have not used heavily the, shall we say, interchange shared partition for data files between a Linux and a Windows environment. Mostly because most that are on Linux probably don't have much, if anything, to do with Windows anymore, or didn't even know Linux was able to support, to some degree, the NTFS file system. Now, this is one of my projects. Next, consider this more advanced. There are two applications. One's called WinBoat and one is called WinApps. And this will give you a general idea about both of them. Supposedly WinBoat's
based distributions. Let's get started. I have put everything in a handy dandy text file right here. I'm going to put these commands in either the description of the video or a pinned comment, so be on the lookout for those. Then all you got to do is copy and paste them as we go. What you're going to need to do first is go into your browser. Today I'm using Zen. Go to winboat.app. Go to where it says download beta. I like that it's called a beta now. They've clarified that it's not a final product. Click on that. Now there's two choices we can use for Linux Mint. We can use the app image, which will work for most distros, or we can use the .deb file. It says Debian-based distros here. Ubuntu is technically based on Debian and also uses the .deb files. So we're going to use that today. Click on download.deb. It's going to download. Then go to your downloads directory. Double click on the file. And if it doesn't open automatically in the package installer, you'll have to select that manually and hit open the first time you run the file. I already have done an installation of this, so mine says reinstall package, but yours will most likely just say install package. Give that a click, put in your nice easy password. And it'll do its thing. Once it's done, you can close that and your downloads folder. You don't need that anymore. And you can also close your browser. I'm just going to minimize mine. Go into the app menu, type in WinBoat. Click on that. And boom, there it is. I'm going to maximize mine so it covers the whole screen. Welcome to WinBoat. Hit next. Agree to the licensing terms. And you'll find that there's some prerequisites that still need to be met, like having Docker installed, Docker Compose v2, all of the Docker groups and user stuffs, and making sure Docker's actually running, as well as installing free RDP. If you don't want to copy my notes, there's handy dandy how links that you can click on that will open in a browser. Fortunately, I have everything we need in that text file, so I'm going to close WinBoat right now and then pop open a terminal. Boom, there's my terminal. Now, let's get started with copying the commands, and I'll tell you what they do. First, we're going to remove all conflicting packages. That is just to make sure our install of Docker is nice and clean. Copy and paste that into a terminal. To paste into a terminal, if you didn't know, is Control-Shift and V. I'm going to hit enter. Put in my nice easy password. And it's going to do its thing. And now that it's done, it's time to set up the Docker repository. Now you can do this all one at a time, but the beauty of the terminal is that you can do things in batches as well. So you can just copy everything here and paste it into the terminal. Saves yourself a lot of time. Then you just hit enter. Boom. Done. Now, what we did there was added the official GPG key. Now we've got to add the official repository for apt sources. So we're going to copy everything here again, just like we did a moment ago. And we're going to paste it into our terminal and hit enter. Dunskies. Now we're actually going to install Docker Engine. Once again, copy the command that I've helpfully provided for you, paste it in, hit enter, say yes. Let it do its thing.
Basically, what's happening is with Docker, you're creating a virtual machine environment. And inside, you would install Windows. It should be licensed properly. Otherwise, if they figure out you're using Windows without a license, you could get some kind of illegal notice. And at the same time, too, it gives you a complete Windows environment on a Linux running system, sharing resources with Linux, so which is CPU, cores, memory, etc., to be able to run the Windows environment and any program. You cannot, at the current time, divorce yourself from the Windows environment, such as Adobe, any of its products, and many other applications, but Adobe is one of the big ones. And it may also help you with some PC games that right now may not run well under or at all under Linux, but there are the Stream and Proton that have come a long way upgrading what you can run natively on a Linux environment. So I thought I'd bring that up. And this is a project I'm interested in trying out, seeing what it's like. But instead of putting in normal Windows, say 11 or 10 environment, I'm going to use a debloated Windows system and put that in, because it'll run faster. When you're running a virtual machine, you are giving up some performance. And there is a positive, especially if you put in Windows 10, that it gives some isolation to the Windows 10 when you're on the internet, and that you otherwise would not have. It makes it more secure working environment. So I'm going to stop that there, and I'm going to play just a little bit of this one here.
For checking out this video. It's a bit of a rant. I'm going to vent a little frustration, and I'm going to ask you for your opinion on this, because I don't quite know how to respond to it. You would think after all these years that I would, and after all the years of teaching people how to use Linux, that I would have some sort of response to this, and I really don't, which is kind of surprising. So since I have started posting about Linux more regularly again, I have had a lot of really great comments. People have sent encouraging words. They've asked very interesting questions. They've made suggestions for upcoming videos, and I want to say thank you to everybody who has done that. But There have also been, some negative comments that have come up there. Some people say that I'm an idiot. Some people say that I don't know what I'm talking about. That's normal, and I accept that. And it's fine. If you don't dig what I'm doing, you can express your opinion. I don't mind. But this is a comment that is repetitive. I get this from a lot of people, and I've gotten it over the years, and it's basically the same theme every time. This particular one comes from Rob R. 4662, and I don't quite know how to deal with this. Usually I say something snarky and dismissive and walk away, but maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, and so therefore I'm going to share it with you, and I would love to hear your opinion. Rob writes, "This is a great example of why most people will never use Linux," and he is referring to the video I posted about learning the Linux file system. He says, "It's a pain in the ass to do most common things on Linux. Windows, Mac OS, you can takes 3 seconds to make 1 or 2 clicks with everything explained, while with Linux you have to study the OS before you can do basically anything." Well, that's not necessarily true, Rob, but we'll get into that shortly. "Don't get me wrong. When set up correctly by a knowledgeable professional, Linux is unbeatable. Unfortunately, IT pros only account for 1% of the population, so 99% are not able to or willing to learn what is necessary to use Linux distros effectively." Let's take the first part of this. My mom, who will be 84 in December, uses Linux. She has used it for more than 10 years now. And yes, I did get her into Linux, and yes, I set her up with her first Linux machine. I gave her the machine, and I gave her a book, and she read the book, and she learned how to do it. And you would think that if our friend Rob here is correct, that she would be calling me once every couple of days with some computer question, asking me, how to do something. Nothing could be further from the truth. I rarely have a conversation with my mother that involves the computer. She actually takes care of everything. She does email, she does genealogy, she scans a lot of documents, she creates a lot of documents to share with other people online. And for her, Linux does everything she needs. And no, she didn't have to go take a course at a college. She didn't have to relearn everything she knew about a computer coming from Windows. Desktop Linux, especially super new user-friendly distributions like Linux Mint, you can point and click your way through doing all of the basic things that you're used to doing. You may never, ever, ever have to open up a terminal or do anything with your system. It's all right there. And if you think Windows and Mac OS is easier to work with, I would disagree with you, because my experience with Windows is that, yeah, you can point and click just the way you can with Linux, but Windows actually makes it more difficult to troubleshoot problems because of the convoluted way the system works and the fact that you don't really know what it's doing a lot of the time. Linux, if you take the time to learn it, doesn't hide anything from you. And if you understand a little bit about how the system works beneath the desktop, you'd be amazed at how quickly you can fix a problem on Linux, whereas on Windows you'd spend half an afternoon chasing it down. And I'm not one of those people that is a Linux nerd who doesn't use Windows. When I was working at the radio station, I had a Linux computer sitting on this desk with a Windows computer right next to it, because my work computer was a Windows computer. And I spent a lot of time in that machine troubleshooting problems and trying to get things to work. So my Windows/Linux experience for like the last 10 years has been about equal. So I think I can compare Linux and Windows with a little bit of authority. And the honest truth is that with Windows, if you're working on certain issues, you're going to have to open up a terminal. You're going to go find a tutorial online. They're going to say, open up a command line, type in this, this, and this, and this is what you get. Just like it is with Linux. So all of that is a myth and not true. Now, if you are completely and totally ignorant of how any computer works, if you sit down in front of Linux, you're probably going to get yourself in trouble. But you probably will do the same thing with Windows too. So that is the other thing. You're sitting there couched in your complacency because all you've ever used is Windows, and you look over and see there's this thing called Linux, and now you're afraid of it. Like, oh my God, it's going to be horrible to use. That's not true at all. So the second part about nobody being willing to learn or able to learn, that's not true at all. I see this as a reflection on the person who is posting this sort of thing, because you're projecting your own feelings on the rest of the population. Speak for yourself. Maybe you're not able to learn. Maybe you're not able to put the necessary effort it takes to learn something into Linux. And if that's you, and that's a personal decision, you go right ahead. But here's the thing. Before you go, I have to ask you, why do you find it necessary to watch a Linux video and then piss all over it in a public forum? That's what I don't get. And that makes me rather flippant with people like this. It really does. My response to Rob was a very curt, lots of people want to learn Linux. Sounds to me like you're not one of them. Because how do you deal with that attitude? Am I supposed to write 14 paragraphs that Rob probably won't read? Rob probably isn't going to see this video. Because people who...
Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go with that. It's getting late. So I'm going to take that down. All right. Now, gotta stop the share. All right. Did anybody get anything out of that so far? So this is, and there's a lot in there, and especially a lot for newbies or light knowledgeable people on Linux in that handout. So I'm going to get ready here to send that to you through the chat. Assuming I can figure out what I'm doing. Okay, it's not quite there yet. There it goes. Should be out there now.
Not yet.
Did you see it?
Nope.
Not yet.
Nope. Not here.
Something tells me my internet connection on this Linux machine dropped. That's the instinct I have at the moment. So I'll have to move to another machine here or reestablish this one. Come on. Yeah. Oh, good old, you dirty son of a guns, I'm telling you. My email client decided to change on me. Okay. I've been getting that in just Linux, a message that is a bunch of hooey. Let's try that again. And, oh, you son of a gun. Darn. Couple things failed. You didn't see it yet, did you?
No,
It just killed my connection again, trying to send it. And let me double check something here. This is only a 8 kilobyte file. It should pass through, but I'm getting a screwy message. And trying this again. See, it says Zoom unexpectedly quit on me. And yet I see Zoom here. So what the heck's going on? I don't know, but it's when I try and send the document that everything goes kablooey. Oops.
Sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back.
That's what it's doing right now. Now I put it in the chat. I haven't hit send yet, but every time, the last 2 times I did send button, it dies. Yep, just died again. I'll have to email you guys the file.
okay.
I don't have another choice right now. I wonder. There's an outside chance I can bring up another machine here and maybe join and send the file. It's the only other option I've got that's likely to work. Let's see. Come on. Give me what I want now, not next century. Let's no longer start. I forgot about that. Nah. Come on. Man, you're starting to drive me right up a wall. Wrong one. Let's see if this will work. That's not looking good. Bob, you're not doing your job.
I just did.
Come on, come on, come on. Gee.
I was just thinking you were testing me.
Let's see if let's see if I can send this. Yeah, there's a bug in the Linux version of Zoom. Another one.
It just came through.
I see it.
Yep. It should have gone there, and you should be able to download it.
It's in the chat, but I can't download it.
Yeah.
Look at the three buttons next to it.
Okay. There it goes. Save. Okay, it's somewhere in my downloads.
Did everybody get a copy?
A second.
Let me put this where I want it. Okay. Yeah, they keep changing where all these Zoom controls are. All right.
It's just like Windows, especially 11.
That's where I want it.
Everybody got a copy?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
In duplicate.
Unless you got something last minute here, we'll call it quits.
Good session.
Good session. 84.7 degrees in Aloha.
Okay.
I got a little rhyme for you, Tim.
Uh-huh.
My computer's acting up today. I may have to sell it. It doesn't do what I want it to, but only what I tell it.
Hey, I got a hammer. Or you can go to a nearby railroad track and tape it to one of the tracks.
I was just thinking this was what you might want to do.
No, that's I've had since August problems with Zoom on Linux.
Huh.
Now there, you got to remember, even if you guys are running Linux right now with Zoom, you're just an attendee to a Zoom meeting. I'm the host, and therefore
I'm co-host.
You may be co-host, but that doesn't have the same effect as a host. A host has to do a whole lot more on their computer equipment to be the host. So,
Plus, I have much more up-to-date equipment, probably.
Oh, heck, I'm using a 15-year-old system with a 23.h2 version of Windows 11. 16 gigs of memory. Nearly a terabyte of storage between two drives.
Well, my Linux came on real good tonight, my Zoom. On my Windows 11 computer, I have trouble getting on Zoom.
But see, I'm trying to do things like share the screen. That was the first problem I had back in August. And then sometimes when I'm trying to do send the handout through the chat, I've only had one instance where I had a file that was so friggin' big it wasn't going to go through the file share. And so I had to email that one. But other than that, tonight, everything looked good. I'm on 6.6.6. on the
Well,
Linux.
that's the problem right there, 656.
That could be. The previous version was 6.6.5.
That's okay.
But and I'm on X11. I'm not on Wayland. Wayland presents other issues.
Yeah, I don't do Wayland because of the share issues.
Well, yeah, but it keeps getting better. I keep looking at it from time to time because I think it's promising, and we've got more and more companies that are dedicated to changing to the Wayland. Some are either providing X Wayland to give a bridge for programs that are still fully written in X11, and other ones are giving you a login option for X11, which is still available in the distro.
What would be nice is to have a toggle on the desktop or on the taskbar that would allow you to switch. But you have to log out and then back in.
That's right. And that's because of the fact that, in a matter of speaking, you're running a slightly different variation. One's a package for X11, one's a package for Wayland, and there may be some components that are used between the two. But you have to have the right desktop environment to get certain things to work, and in other environments, it won't work.
There is at least one fellow working on a Linux, which will act basically as a shell that launches different distros for different purposes. And you can switch back and forth between them. Probably it's all containerized.
Yeah. And probably a virtualized type of environment. But in general, the only other thing I know that's out there was by a Fedora, I'll call him a teammate. I don't know his exact position. He created a product called Ex Libre. Ex Libre is a modernized rewrite per se of X11 that would extend its useful life by using the Ex Libre instead of X11 in the distro. And Fedora flat out said, no way. But it is available out there on the internet if somebody wants to try and play with it and see if they can make it work.
Well, it could be used in other distros, I think, or adapted to them.
Yeah, right. But usually most of that is required by the development team of the distro to do. Usually it is not something that the average person is going to do. Maybe a high-end user that isn't necessarily a developer could take Ex Libre and make it work. I don't know. I didn't dig into it much. I just know of where Ex Libre came from, and that it was turned down by Fedora, and they just want to go full boat on Wayland in a future version. There's debate right now if version 49, which isn't even there yet, I think current version is 43, whether or not they're going to go full boat Wayland or Wayland with still the option of logging in with X11. And that was the last word I heard. I haven't heard anything else. And then you got Ubuntu that seems to be hell-bent on going straight to Wayland. How that works out, I don't know. And I'd like to know if any of those developers, as they find problems and solutions for problems in Wayland, are they sharing it with the development community?
I can tell you what's happening with Ubuntu. They can afford to take everything into GNOME and Wayland because they are taking everything over to snaps. And snaps are their thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be like Windows S, a walled garden type of a store environment where you don't install anything as a deb package.
That could be. Don't know.
I mean, they're never going to get all the way there because somebody's always going to have a flavor that doesn't do that.
Well, that's where I think X-Wayland comes in. If they include X-Wayland, any native X11 package that doesn't convert to Wayland theoretically should run.
Yeah, X-Wayland is one possible way. There are several other ways of bridging the gap, just like there are ways of bridging between Pipewire and Pulse Audio. I noticed that there is now a Pipewire control similar to the Pulse Audio volume control. And that'll be a GUI. That's already available, but I suspect it's still under development.
Well, a lot of things are constantly under development. It just depends upon what distro you're using as to how raw that particular environment is, such as Arch is bleeding edge development. As soon as something gets released, they release it, and they don't even necessarily test it to make sure that it works correctly.
Right. In Mint, I have had to do three things. One, the login sound was too faint, so I changed the file and made a substitution of something just a little louder. That involved using FFmpeg in the command line, not too difficult. Then I put two commands that run on login. One starts Pulse Audio, and the other sets the volume level. And I can set it for a meeting so that it's lower, and I can set it for everyday use so that it's a little bit louder. And I can make those into separate commands, which I can toggle.
Sounds good.
So takes a lot of the guesswork out of, are you too loud or too soft or just right in a meeting?
Yeah, well, that's a problem depending on each individual. I wouldn't have the time right now to really mess with what you did unless it was a real irritation for me. Then I would engineer the time to try and address it.
Well, actually, a command at startup is very quick and very easy. It's a quick and dirty solution.
Yeah, I've got.
But the things I've done with Pulse Audio and integrating it with Pipewire, and now I think they're basing it on Wire Plumber, the Pipewire controls. I got to try those.
Well, I do have some startup applications, and some of them work good in some distro environments and are a nightmare in other environments.
That's right.
Each
I don't
one-
do the same.
Each
I
one-
don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Each one's got its quirks. For example, you might get something working in Mint and it doesn't work in Ubuntu, or vice versa. And that's what I've got right now. I've got something that works in Ubuntu Cinnamon, and I can't get. You can't do it exactly the same way in Mint, and I haven't found exactly the right way of presenting the information. It's seeing and trying to do most of what I want to do, but there are some parameters that have to be passed along that don't seem to be passed along, or they're not being executed. I don't know which yet.
Yeah, sound, Wi-Fi, and to some extent, video. are the things in Linux which can really give you headaches if you
Yeah.
have an issue.
Yeah. But I think the video generally has gotten better. Whether or not the sound has gotten better, I would say, if I remember right, the earliest Linux systems that I was playing around with, I think had ALSA.
Also,
Yeah.
also mixer,
And then went to Pulse, I think. And
also
then,
audio.
and then now Wire, pipe wire.
Now Pipewire, and Pipewire Wire Plumber has been up until now command line, so that it's pretty arcane stuff.
Yeah.
But now they're getting a graphical interface for it.
Well, that's the thing with Linux. There's a lot of stuff that was strictly command line, and eventually somebody wanting to use it, thinking it's too a great tool, but it's too arcane through the command line, creates a graphical wrapper, and when you download it, you get the graphical wrapper plus the base program, and it's all graphical. You don't have to think about the command line. That's kind of like where that warehouse program came from. And that one there allows you to run it graphically only or through the terminal. And in the terminal, you have the ability to dump out all the settings for not warehouse, CPU X.
CPUX, okay.
That's the one I was thinking of. But it gives you the best of both worlds, depending on what you want. And I'm sure eventually in the graphical interface, they'll have a way of taking all the setting information and doing the dump without going to the terminal.
Yeah.
It's just a case of time.
Yeah, it's a question of whether somebody decides this is a project they want to do.
Yeah, but I assume whoever created the graphical wrapper, this is like first draft or that's stable, and hopefully they'll go on, besides bug fixes, add features like doing the dump.
They'll continue working on it until they find they have to earn a living.